So this is kind of a red alert kind of video that I hope reaches a lot more people than I expect. I've not been present doing Sway Love associated type of work for a number of different reasons, and I hope to address that at some point, but I couldn't not make a video about this. At minimum, I needed to at least make you aware that this is happening. Maybe you already are aware. This would be extremely important information for anybody that loves dogs, and more specifically like the dogs that end up in these kill pounds. I hope this video stirs somebody up and something from the grassroots is able to come into fruition and change this fast, because I was really stunned to learn that the LA County shelters are still closed to the public. I knew that they were doing this throughout the whole COVID ordeal, and I had many reservations about it then. I'd privately talked to friends about how this entire COVID reality is like the perfect curtain for the shelter system to hide behind and take advantage of, but I never made it a huge deal because, quite frankly, I don't have the time or the platform that I used to have, sadly. But now we're beyond COVID in many ways. We now know way more than we did. Jurisdictions have tried different approaches. There's been all kinds of mandates and vaccines and closures, and now there's all kinds of data points on how these things have worked out. And I don't want to make this video to be political in the sense of American two-party politics or anything, but this is no longer 2020. As a society, as a country, as a world, we've moved beyond COVID lockdowns. The shelter system in Los Angeles, for whatever reason though, has not. I'm shooting this video on a Sunday night. I'm not gonna post it for a couple days because I sent an email out to the Department of Animal Care and Control today, and I want to see how they respond to the questions that I asked. But the shelter is still closed, everybody. We all know how the shelter system has behaved historically to dissenters of their narratives that they put out. We all know how the shelter system, county specifically, has come up egregiously short in so many areas of animal welfare. Pre-COVID, this department was routinely taking shortcuts, fighting proverbial sunlight, handcuffing volunteers, and making things extremely difficult for animals to get out of there. And that was when the shelter was totally open to the public, and anyone could go in at any time and for any reason, so long as they were within the working hours of that day. The shelter has been totally closed now for 2.5 years, possibly longer. Visually, the place is not welcoming. Yeah, they painted the building, which is great, but the animal section is completely closed. The office is dark and roped off, and you can't go inside or even see who's in there. Now, you cannot get beyond the gate that separates the public from the animals unless you have made an appointment online. If you show up cold, they will turn you away. The appointments are in 15-minute increments or blocks, and there can only be 2 people or families per 15-minute block, and a shelter employee actually has to accompany you throughout the facility as you go. These apparently are the current rules and have been the rules for like over 2 years. This is taking what already was an extremely unlikely scenario from happening, which is an organic adoption from the county pound, and reducing that by like 90%. Regarding COVID, we are far beyond anything that they could point backwards to over the past 2 years and say, well, we're still doing this because of this. We're beyond these things. Yet the shelter is still closed, and they are still operating under these guidelines. Last time I was at Carson, it was February 5th, and they wouldn't let me in then, but that is where I first learned in person about the new appointment model that they're doing. There was a dog that I wanted to visit this weekend, and I had made a point to get over there in hopes of doing something to help it get adopted. And I showed up at 1:30 yesterday, which would have been Saturday, and they told me that I could not enter. There was no one there. Let me make that clear. There was nobody there at that time. Not a single person from the general public was in that shelter when I was standing out there asking to go in. They told me that I needed an appointment and that it needed to be made online first. I told them that I specifically didn't make an appointment because I didn't want to take the place of anyone who was coming in to potentially adopt. They asked me if I was there to adopt. I told them no, I wasn't. They told me that every day from 3 to 3:30, they allow people who didn't have an appointment to come back and enter the shelter. I couldn't come back at 3 that same day, but I did go back today, which is the next day, Sunday. I showed up today at exactly 3 p.m. Staff immediately came out, recognized me, and asked me again if I had an appointment. I told them no, and I explained why, and I told them that they told me that 3 to 3:30 was open for those without appointments. That's why I'm here. They then reminded me that yesterday I told them that I had no intention to adopt, and that the 3 to 3:30 time frame was only for people who wanted to adopt. Me, flabbergasted at this point, said, I could have just lied to you, right? But I was honest, told them that I wasn't adopting, and told them that I just wanted to visit the dogs, which is what I always did in the past as well. Take pictures, that kind of stuff. So I was like, what if I tell you now that I do have an intention to adopt? Can I go in? And she said no, because you already told me that you didn't. They also told me that I couldn't take my camera in because they already have someone who officially does that for the shelter now. Okay, great, but it doesn't make sense why I still wouldn't be able to take my camera in. That seems like a violation to me. Anyways, they turned me away again today. At this point, I mentioned that it almost seems as though they were using the whole COVID protocol stuff as a way to restrict access. This particular person that I was talking to then repeatedly told me that I was obnoxious, which is fine, and told me that there was nothing that she could do. And she just stood there, and I just kind of stood there, and I was staring at her, and she was just so, her eyes were telling me okay, so get lost. She also blamed me for not being able to walk someone else through the shelter because they were short-staffed and I was taking up her time. I asked to speak to her boss, and she said that nothing would change. And I said, fine, please still get them. Now Sergeant Webb comes out. He repeats the same stuff to me and then acts puzzled when I tell him that I just came to visit with the dogs. So you just want to visit with them? He's saying, and I was like, yeah, just want to visit with them. He said that we don't do that anymore, and that I need to make an appointment. Yet I couldn't make an appointment for that day though, even though I was physically there, but for another day. This is typical Carson Shelter semantic bullshit that they do. I reminded them that I didn't have an intention to adopt, so how does someone that doesn't have an intention to adopt make an appointment without being dishonest? And thus, how does someone in that situation gain any access to the shelter whatsoever? He told me, and I quote, the administration was working on a program for situations like that. Working on? They've been operating under this new way of doing things for almost 3 years. I continued to talk, and he simply turned around and just walked away from me. So I just stood there, quite literally in shock, for a minute, for a couple minutes, still standing there. And I just turned around and drove home really angry and really sad. I can't put into words how frustrating it is to know that all the access that we had back then, none of that access is available currently and under the guise of COVID protocol or whatever. I don't understand how this is still happening. And forgive me if there's people who've been raising hell about this that I don't know about. That certainly could be possible and probably is possible. Please let me know who these people are so I can connect with them, because I want that. But this publicly funded shelter should not be able to close their doors like this and keep the public away. It is an atrocity what is going on there. And I do not use that word as hyperbole because I know what goes on inside of that place. I know the things that they would do back when it was completely open, back when we were all living in that very organic golden age of social media where they were being put on blast for specific things. And then they were still turning around and still doing it. What in the world do you think is going on now? That's the question that haunts me, and I'm sure many others. This shelter has to be called upon to open immediately. They cannot keep doing this. For the last 2+ years, I know that I have silently mourned for these dogs that are in there, that have been in there, and that nobody will ever know about. Because these are the things that I carried around when I was going on a weekly basis. Just because I'm physically not there doesn't mean that my mind is not randomly, sporadically there. I think about them all the time. And I can't believe that this is still happening. And again, I know I'm not the only one that is frustrated by this. So if you're out there and you're frustrated or you have stories, please reach out to me so we can connect and, be more dynamic together. We need to come together on this and stop this before they fully normalize this nonsense that they're trying to do. This cannot be their new way. And it seems like they're trying to move forward as if this is going to become the new normal and the better way, in their opinion, to operate. And of course they would. It restricts the public's access and thus eliminates the ways in which the public can attempt to improve things or hold the department in any way accountable. It also nullifies any programs or perspectives that they were being dragged into being receptive of for many years past, and allows them to go back to the old ways of doing things, quite literally in secrecy. Bluntly, nobody knows what the hell they're doing there. And that's exactly the way that they like it. So, please, I know, surprise, long-winded video. Please share this video, write to me, and feel free to offer any suggestions as to what we as a general public can do to put pressure on this shelter and this department to open back up and stop taking advantage of this situation, because that's exactly what they're doing. The animals need people to come out of the woodwork and speak for them on this. This is very crucial to create some kind of pressure campaign, and that starts with making people aware. So please help me in doing that. Something needs to be done here, because this can't be the new normal. They cannot normalize this. This is an atrocity that cannot be normalized. So there's power in numbers, and we just need to find each other. So please find me. Please help other people find me. Please.